Hi, in this video we're going to take a look at fantasy sci-fi versus historical wargaming. In the last week or so there's been a bit of drama on YouTube within the hobby. I'm not really going to get into that, but one of the things that whole drama brought up was which one was more popular, science fiction, fantasy, or historical, and the reasons why people get in to those two genres. So I'm going to talk from my experience. We're going to relate to some of the experiences my friends have had, but I'm also going to look at the War Game Survey, which is done every year and produces information around the wargaming hobby and the industry. So we're going to look to that for some facts and figures, and then we're just going to talk about some of the reasons why I think people get in to fantasy over historical and vice versa. If you were looking at the two different genres, there are probably some reasons, definite reasons why people get into, say, fantasy and science fiction. And we have to then look at the elephant in the room, and that's Games Workshop. Games Workshop do produce probably the most popular games within the hobby. But their games are only two within the genre of science fiction and fantasy. And most people that are wargamers now, with under a certain age, will have had probably their first steps into wargaming via those games. And one of those reasons is access. It's also the fact that Games Workshop have now had a visible presence on the high street in most UK towns and cities for well over 30 years. I remember as a teenager there were two independent shops and the Games Workshop where I used to go get my hobby stuff in Exeter, and that we're talking back in the 80s. So Games Workshop have had a presence in most major cities and now a lot of towns for several years. They're also very good at setting up school clubs involved in schools. So most youngsters, their first point of contact with war games will be Games Workshop, and that's why within that demographic, the majority of gamers will be science fiction and fantasy, because that's their first port of call. That's their first experience with wargaming. And historical don't have that. There aren't warlord stores on the high street. There aren't Battlefront stores on the high street. And that's the advantage that Games Workshop gives fantasy and sci-fi genres, is they have a big presence. And so because of that, they are in fact they are the biggest fantasy science fiction war games in the market. And you also have to remember, within that demographic of youngsters, is that one of the reasons they will probably gravitate towards fantasy and science fiction is because it won't feel like schoolwork. Historicals is obviously, history. So it involves research, the periods, researching the battles, the equipment, the armies. And for most youngsters, if they've no interest in history, that's just an extension of extra schoolwork for them. Now, they'll be doing that within the science fiction and fantasy genres. They're playing 40k, they're still reading about the different armies. They're still researching the different weapons, vehicles, colour schemes and all the rest, exactly the same ways that they would with historicals, but it won't feel like schoolwork to them. whereas the historical aspect probably does on that. For a lot of them, won't gravitate towards historical because of that. So within that demographic, you can basically say, without even looking at a war game survey or anything like that, the majority of players within the teenage, from say 10 to sort of 17, 18, are predominantly playing sci-fi and fantasy, and predominantly playing Games Workshop sci-fi and fantasy. That all changes as the demographics get older, and then we start seeing changes with the way people play and what types of games they play. You know, as I've said before, youngsters will tend to gravitate towards sci-fi and fantasy because that's dead easy for them to get into. You walk into a Warhammer shop and everything's in there. You haven't got to search for anything. You got the armies in there. You got the books, the dice, the glue, paints, the brushes. You know, it's Games Workshop has created its own ecosystem where you don't need to go elsewhere if you don't want to for any of your hobby materials. So for youngsters, that's perfect first step into wargaming. And it was my first step into wargaming was through Games Workshop. Historicals, and this is where the problem has lied in the past, and it was probably one of the reasons why I didn't get into historicals until I got slightly older. It's difficult to get in and jump in. Not only have you got, it's not jumping into one game, you've got a vast array of periods. You know, you can play Neolithic cavemen or on mammoth hunts right through up to sort of Cold War gone hot. So it's your first thing, it sort of difficult, is which period of history do you pick? Then you go, well, what rule system do I go with? Where do I get my miniatures? Which miniature manufacturer do I go with? Then you're looking at dice and all the rest of it. And then it's like terrain. Where do I get my terrain from? Can I get terrain locally? And then it suddenly becomes problematic. It becomes difficult. Your entry point in isn't easy. Now that has changed with some companies in recent years. Warlord now do starter sets for most of their games. Battlefront do great starter sets for Flames of War and Team Yankee. And other manufacturers are starting to now, if they don't do a starter box, they'll bundle together all the elements you'll need to get started for their game. And like I said, that the entry point into historical has always been difficult. And then once you've picked your period, you've got all your miniatures, all your rest, you know, your gubbins and all the rest of it, you then need to start looking, well, I now need to do a bit of research. I need to know a bit about what my army is, where it's come from, how do I paint it, what's the colour schemes, where do they fit within the period and the history. So then you're having to go and buy books. And then books generally isn't the problem. You can go to most bookshops and you'll go to the history section. You should be able to find something on your period. But what I'm saying is there isn't walk into one shop on the high street and find everything you want. Unless you've got an excellent independent gaming store near you. And even then, they may not have everything. And then the other thing as well you've got with historicals is scales. Which scale do you choose? Do you go 28mm? Do you go 6mm? Do you go in between like 10, 15mm? And because of all these different scales, different periods, even you walk into an independent gaming store, the chances are they will not have exactly what you're after. They'll have a good chunk of historical stuff, but not necessarily what you want. And so then you've got to go trawling on the internet looking for stuff. Back when I started, it was mail order. It was even worse. The internet wasn't even about. You had to order a mail order catalogue, and then once that arrived, you worked out what you wanted. 9 times out of 10, they weren't pictures, so you were basing that on blind buy, and then that would then get posted to you. But it has been made easier with a lot of the more modern manufacturers that have stepped into historical. But that was one. I would say that's his biggest problem, is that it's accessibility. It's if you don't know where to start, starting is quite difficult. If you've joined it's easier to get into if you join a club and there are people, like-minded people there, that can sort of help you, point you in the right direction. For unfortunately, we now have internet, and most companies have websites. But in the past, it was really difficult to jump in without going to a club and sort of finding people within your club that could help you. But nowadays, it's a little bit easier to step in. Not as easy as Warhammer and 40k, but it's a lot easier. So there's a wargame survey done every year. It's carried out by one of the wargaming magazines, Wargame Soldiers and Strategy, and it gives you an idea of what people are playing, what genres they're playing, and it gives you the survey gives a good idea of how the hobby is for that particular year. And in 2022, there was a huge change with what types of games wargamers were playing. What we saw was a shift to more players playing historical than fantasy and sci-fi. And I think this is the first time in a long time this has happened. I think predominantly in previous years, it's always been the big one was always sci-fi and fantasy. But it's what's made the change is that it's the people that are playing mixed genres, people like myself that play historical, play sci-fi, play fantasy. You know, we're not stuck on one particular genre of wargaming. Now, those that predominantly have only ever played fantasy, predominantly only ever played historical, generally haven't changed their habits. But there is a growing group that play mixed, and within that group, there's been a growth in playing historical. Yeah, so we've seen a growth in those that play a variety of different genres. They're playing more historical than they previously were. So overall, the picture has changed considerably, that now there are more historical players than there are fantasy and sci-fi. Now, the question is why? Why is this? I suspect it's because there are companies now providing starter sets, very good value starter box sets. There are a lot more skirmish historical war games now. You know, things like Gangs of Rome, Test of Honor. You've got skirmish games that kind of sit between sort of gang type skirmish, like Gangs of Rome, and then mass battle. So, you know, games like Saga, and they become very popular. And if you go to websites like Gripping Beast, you can get everything you need to get playing Saga all on one site. It's not difficult to get into now. You know, manufacturers and where companies are making it a lot easier for you to jump into historical. And there's now an opportunity to play not only just different periods but different types of games. You know, you could jump into Gangs of Rome and you only need some terrain and a handful of miniatures, and you can get a flavour of playing historics. And it's not your typical type of historical game. It's not mass battle. It's a skirmish gang. It's more like historical Necromunda, and it's got some very nice mechanics in it, which will appeal to a lot of people. So I think changes within the industry has helped promote historical to a wider audience. And so, yeah, so for the first time, we're now seeing historicals being played more than fantasy. Now, if you then go to games, individual game systems, 40k is still the biggest game on the market. It's got more players than any other game. If you go into historicals, there won't be one particular game that could compete with 40k because they don't have a big enough player base. But as a whole, historical as a whole, there are now more people playing it. So when we look at individual periods, the top choice for gamers is World War II. And I suspect that's bolt action and Flames of War. I've done that. Second is science fiction, including 40k. 40k on its own is the fourth most popular choice, because fantasy comes above 40k, but that includes Age of Sigmar and all the other like Kings of War all in one group. But individually, 40k comes in at fourth, and then Napoleonic Wars, it comes in after that, followed by Ancients, and then followed by Age of Sigmar, and then you've got Medievals, Dark Ages, Pulp, etc. So what we're seeing is a change in gaming preferences. 40k is no longer the first choice for everyone. A lot more people are playing historical games. Now, there's a lot of those historical players who probably still play 40k as well. You know, they're probably playing bolt action in historics and playing 40k. Their 30k is their science fiction genre choice, because they are similar-ish. Because you get tanks in both. You get cannon. You know, it's just one science fiction, one's World War II. But this is a bit of a big change. I mean, most people have always assumed, and probably still assume, that the top boy, is 40k. And as an individual game, it still is. But when you put it in with in the genre of science fiction and fantasy, it's not. Historical jump above it. Primarily World War II. If you take all of historicals together and lump it as one genre as historical, it's vastly more players playing historical games than science fiction and fantasy, and the survey's showing that now. It's just that when we go down to individual rule systems, 40k is still the big boy as an individual game. It has a big player base, and if you take 40k out of the science fiction equation, suddenly science fiction and fantasy drops significantly in player base. And if you took Warhammer out of it, it's very minimal player base. The games within those genres just aren't big enough to compete. They don't have the big enough player base. The only reason fantasy science fiction is as popular as it is as a genre is because of Warhammer, both 40k and Age of Sigmar. And then we're seeing that with things like the Wargame survey. So which is quite interesting, because a couple of years ago, people were talking about, is historicals dying? I mean, I remember there were lots of videos on YouTube where people were discussing this topic. But that's completely changed. And whether that changed during the pandemic or that's changed more recently in the last sort of 12, 18 months, and part of that is because of changing economics, with the cost of living. people might be switching to play more historical because 40k and Age of Sigmar has become quite expensive in comparison. There could be a number of those reasons. I would suspect that the demographic for historicals isn't younger players. It's probably, I would probably say it's 13 upwards. With some people in their 20s playing it, but I doubt at this stage that there's a huge amount of youngsters playing historical. I suspect that demographic really hasn't changed much, that majority play 40k or Age of Sigmar. Yes, it's quite interesting when you start looking at the Wargaming survey and then you start speaking to people. There's a lot more people playing historicals than you realise. And they're playing a variety of different periods, but with the bulk or the number one choice is World War II. And I'm going to assume that's probably bolt action and Flames of War being the two popular rule systems being played. And if you go to like Warlord, they have bolt action, and then they have like things like Cruel Seas, they have Blood Red Skies for your aircraft and stuff like that. There's a whole chunk of different gaming within World War II. And so it's not surprising World War II is really popular period. There's so many different sort of levels you can play within World War II. You know, you can play land battles, you can play sea battles, you can play air battles. So there's a good variety of choice for people to actually get into that period. And it's probably one of the more accessible periods to get into in regards to research books and stuff like that. I mean, there's loads of stuff being written about World War II all the time. And there are several manufacturers producing kits and miniatures for it. I mean, Warlord and Rubicon, just two of the manufacturers for producing tanks. I mean, they're on par, especially Rubicons are on par with scale model miniatures. And then there's quite a raft of different companies now producing plastics. You've got Perry, who produce some lovely plastics. Warlord producing plastics. War Games Atlantic produce plastics now for World War II. And so I think that's opened up historicals more as well to players, because in the past it was all metal, and that put a lot of people off, especially those that come from the background of, say, playing Games Workshop miniatures, where they've been plastic for a long time, and a lot of people would prefer to stay plastic rather than getting involved in metals and dealing with metal miniatures, because it's not as easy to kit bash a metal miniature like it is a plastic kit. So I think the advantage of now having plastic kits for historicals has tempted a lot of people across from, say, fantasy and sci-fi, because it's a lot easier materials to work with, and they're used to working with that material, and a lot of them don't really like working with metal, and probably a lot of them don't even like working with resin. Resin's because Games Workshop brought out resin miniatures, called the fine cast stuff, and it was labelled quite quickly as fail cast by a lot of gamers. So yeah, so I think the plastics have helped everything moving to plastic, and why people are now playing historicals a lot more, and the fact that companies are making starter boxes or starter bundles to make it easier to get into. But yeah, it's interesting the fact that we are now seeing a resurgence in people playing historical. There is this misconception that it's grumpy old men, you know, pensioners playing historicals. Well, that's not really the case. That's just a derogatory image of historical wargaming. Historical wargamers has a wide age range. Yeah, predominantly there's a lot more older, and I think as you get older, you tend to sort of switch towards historicals and start playing historicals as you get older. I mean, as I sort of hit my 30s, I started playing historicals more, and I predominantly play historicals now. But I think the image that a lot of sci-fi fantasy players have of historical players is wrong. And I think the view that their genre is the biggest is now wrong. Yes, 40k is probably the biggest individual game on the market, but as in its genre, it's not anymore. And there's lots of reasons why people will probably play historicals. I mean, there's been a lot of films, television dramas that might have piqued people's interest, and also it's just something different. If you've grown up playing 40k or Warhammer Fantasy and Age of Sigmar, you might just be, well, kind of fancy something different, completely different, and then historicals is completely different from those games. So that might be one of the reasons why people are switching. The price might be another one. But either way, one of the things that I find annoying is this thing of where people are having to go at other people because of the game they play. Yeah, you've got, you know, like fantasy people don't think think historicals aren't cool and it's derogatory old men. What historicals think, you know, that people that play 40k aren't real war gamers. All that, it's all nonsense. We're all geeks pushing toy soldiers around the table. We shouldn't be criticising each other and pulling holes out of each other's games, or how we play, or how we interact within the hobby, because it's all the same hobby. At the end of the day, we're all a bunch of nerds playing with toy soldiers on a tabletop. They're just different toy soldiers. So I don't see why we're all pointing fingers and being unpleasant to each other. We get enough of that from people that don't play war games. So yeah, that's basically my take on the whole sort of historical fantasy. I personally will play any war game. It doesn't bother me. Doesn't bother me what genre it is, and I play now play with most scales as well. 6mm is probably a little too small for me. I'm going blind as it enough, quick enough as it is, without having to try and squint at those. But you never know. I'm going to Joy of 6 this year, so I might get tempted to pick some 6mm up. But yeah, historicals is becoming more popular as a genre, which is good to see as a historical player. Anyway, if you like this video, you like the channel, hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.